Okay, so I've noticed not many people collect guns like I do. I've noticed that there are a lot of people that have a bunch of guns, but they're really cheap guns. And when you look at their collection, there's not really much that stands out about it. It's just the same stuff over and over again. I mean, or you have people that want to start collecting guns, they just don't know where to start. So I figure if I give my advice here, this might help some people out. So what I wanted to do was throw in a little bit of criteria and give y'all some ideas on how you can build a gun collection that really stands out. All right, so let's get started. All right, so obviously it's not much of a collection if it's just one or two high dollar firearms. However, at the same time, we have people a lot more often go the other way with this. And that is they get a bunch of cheap guns. And, yeah, they have a lot of guns, but, it's like, okay, we'll check out my llama or my Yama. Okay, that's, pretty cool, 45. Check out my Walther PP. All right, this one actually isn't cheap. Check out my Tokarev, or my Zatsava. It shoots a 7.62 by 39 Tokarev. I think I got my Taurus Millennium Pro right here. Imagine going through maybe 50, 60, 100 guns just like all of these. Not much character to it. I mean, they're pretty much all the same type of firearm, right? Not much that stands out to that either. So what you really need to do is you need to find a good balance between having a large collection, and having some variety in the collection, some high dollar guns in the collection, and a bunch of other topics, that we're going to be talking about when it comes to collecting firearms. You want the collection in and of itself to have some personality. Which brings me to my next portion of the topic. Practical use. I'm going to start off on practical use. You have to have at least a few guns in your collection that have a practical use, right? Think about what you're doing. You're collecting guns. You're collecting an item that's valuable. You're collecting an item that's a target by thieves, right? So a good starter is to have some firearms with a practical use. Something for personal protection. Something to protect your collection. One of the things is you'll need a good concealed carry gun. You'll need probably a good home defense gun. Things of that nature. But also, what else do you want to do? Do you want to go clay pigeon shooting? Well, it's good to always have a good trap gun if that's in your hobbies. And believe me, guys, you're going to want to go out and do some shooting sports if you're a firearm collector. And I know this, obviously, because I am. And plus, if your firearms collection has several practical use guns, that you can go and take to the range and shoot, or you can go take with your buddies to go hunting, stuff you can carry for personal protection, maybe do some 3-gun style shooting or some, more tactical style shooting. That gives your collection a bit more character there, right? Practical use is a big thing when it comes to a collection. It's okay to have some collectibles, some stuff that you may never take to the range to shoot more than maybe once or twice, once every blue moon. But you need to have something practical use. That's a big must. Okay, so rare and unique guns. Obviously, your collection's not going to have much character if you don't have some rare guns in there, right? That's just how it goes. I mean, you want to really add character to your collection, you need to have some rare guns in there. Like, for example, this Walther PP. It's a police model, obviously, with a lanyard. It's pre-68. They don't import these anymore. But, it's really got some character to this gun. This gun is older than I am. This gun is as old as my mother. Another one, this Mark 23. These things are hard to find, and when you find them, they're expensive. Interesting about this one is that it's designed as an offensive handgun, whereas pretty much all the rest of your handguns are designed as defensive handguns. Again, this is a rare gun and it adds a lot of character to my collection. Another one, the Colt Python. This one right here, they don't make these anymore. They stopped making them back in the 90s. So they're pretty hard to find. And to have one in this condition, it's pretty hard to do. Not many people are going to have one in this condition. But again, it gives my collection some character. And this is what I'm talking about when it comes to rare and unique guns. You got to have them in your collection if you really want your collection to stand out. Novelty guns. What do I mean by novelty guns? Well, novelty guns are guns that are going to turn people's heads. They're unique guns. They have very little, if any, practical purpose to them whatsoever. But they're really fun. They're really interesting. There's something unique about them. Take for example this one right here, this Desert Eagle. Does it have much of a practical purpose? Well, aside from hunting stuff like large feral hog or bear, not really. Rounds are expensive. There are other options you can go with when you're hunting feral hog or bear. But all in all, this is one of those guns that's, really cool. One of the reasons why I bought this is because the Desert Eagle and 50 Action Express has been one of those guns that's fascinated me. And again, that's one of the many reasons why I bought this. So, on that note, you got to have some novelty guns. Now, I take this out to the range and shoot it. Obviously, I get people's attention. When I'm showcasing my collection for friends or family, that gets their attention. This is one of the ones that stands out. Again, not much practical purpose. It's really expensive. The rounds are really expensive. It's a novelty. But part of the purpose to having a gun collection is that you have something that's not many other people are going to have. And it might not be for a practical purpose. If all your guns are practical purpose guns, your collection, really won't be over 10 guns probably. But I digress. Let's move on to the next topic. All right, so as you should know as a gun collector, guns sometimes aren't always the easiest thing to take care of. You've got to invest some time into taking care of your firearms. Now, a way to help that out is if a lot of your firearms you buy are reliable, well built, and low maintenance. That would be one key. They've got to work really well. There's nothing that's more of a buzzkill than going to a range, and you realize that, your gun doesn't work, right? Or it's always having malfunctions, or it's always messing up. That's not a fun day at the range. This Glock G34, very accurate, very reliable, very low maintenance, Last a while. And I don't know too many gun collectors that don't have intentions on passing their guns down to others when they pass on. I just don't. I have intentions on passing my guns down to relatives when I pass on. So, as you can tell, you want your gun collection to be pretty solid, pretty reliable. This Mark 23 is another fine example of a well-built, very reliable gun that's going to last the test of time, right? This is another one I hope to see. Well, I know I won't see, but after I pass on, I'd like this to stay in the family for quite some time. I'd like to pass this down to one of my younger relatives, and I'd like to see them pass it down to their younger relatives, So again, you want something that's going to withstand the test of time. If you get a bunch of cheap guns that are unreliable, that rust easy, you throw them in the garage, you don't take care of them, you're going to wind up with a lot of broken guns. You're going to wind up with a collection that doesn't last. You're going to wind up with a collection you can't really take to the range, and all it is just a bunch of look-at guns. So I can't really see to the point to buying a bunch of broken guns or a bunch of guns that are going to break, and they're always going to be broken. With that being said, I'm going to move on to my next point. Common ammunition. All right, so I don't know too many gun collectors that don't like to go out and shoot guns. I just don't. So that being said, you want to buy some guns, at least, with some very common ammunition that's cheap, that's always there, that's always going to be there because they're popular calibers, so you can enjoy shooting. For rifles, I would say 7.62 by 39, 5.56 by 45, 7.62 by 51 or 308, 223, 22 LR. These are all common calibers for rifles. You got to have at least a few rifles in those calibers. Shotguns, 12 gauge is is the most common round for shotguns. It's the most common gauge that shotguns are made in. So again, when you're getting shotguns, you go get something like a 16 gauge. Well, you're going to have a harder time finding ammunition for the 16 gauge or a 10 gauge than you are, say, a 12 gauge. 20 gauge and 410, yeah, those are out there, but they're not quite as common as 12 gauge, and you don't have as many options as you do with a 12 gauge. Pistols, 22 LR, 9mm, 40 cal Smith & Wesson, and 45, as well as 357 Magnum. Those are going to be your more common rounds. Again, you can go and get something chambered in 50 Action Express. Those rounds are real hard to find. Same for 454 Cazul. And to a, to another extent 5.7, or to a really lesser extent 44 Magnum, even though 44 Magnum is still kind of a common cartridge, especially when you compare it to something like a 50 AE or a 500 Smith & Wesson. So again, go to Walmart's. The ammunition you see for sale at Walmart's is generally going to be more common ammunition. So And that's the type of ammunition you're going to be shooting the most anyway, right? The next question you should be asking yourself, how many guns do you have that have some sort of historic value? Did they have, take for example this M1 carbine. Obviously our soldiers use this in conflicts such as World War II and the Korean War. Now, again, I don't know per se if an actual soldier used this or not, or, if it was a non-issue or if it was a remake or whatnot. But it's still an interesting model. And if you have one where, it was issued to a soldier, you can get all the paperwork proving it, that just increases the value of it. And it's always interesting to say, well, hey, I've got the rifle my grandpa, Pappy, carried in World War II, or the same model anyway, So, again, if you have some guns with some historic value to them, that always makes your collection a little bit more interesting. Controversial models, right? To really have an interesting collection, you've got to have some controversial models, right? You have to have some models that at least a gun control advocate would go, why would you need a gun like that? And the odds are if you don't have a very interesting collection. Part of my collection is this 5.7. One of the reasons I have it is because it's considered the most controversial pistols in the U.S. In fact, it was considered the most controversial pistol. Brady campaign called it a cop killer pistol, which is not true. It's not designed to be a cop killer, nor was that ever its intent. Nonetheless, it was the most controversial pistol in the U.S. It used to have the actual highest muzzle velocity for pistols in the U.S. up until a 22 TCM replaced it in that spot about 2 years ago when they designed the 22 TCM, obviously. But nonetheless, pistol's pretty controversial. Another example of a controversial firearm I have, and I don't know why. I mean, it's America's rifle. It's the most popular rifle platform in the U.S., the AR-15. I've actually had somebody say, why would you need a gun like that? Which is always a good sign. It's always a good sign that, you have an interesting firearm. When somebody asks you, why would you need a gun like that? I don't think the AR-15 should be controversial considering the fact that the most popular platform in the U.S., but then again, you've got people that want them banned, just like you've got people that want the 5.7 banned. And to me, you just can't have a really interesting gun collection that stands out if you don't have at least one or two controversial models in that collection. Right. So you have to have some high-value firearms, high-dollar firearms in your collection. Your collection at the end of the day is an investment, and you do want it to be worth something, right? So sometimes instead of just jumping the gun and buying the cheapest model you can buy, for the 50th time, you might want to save up and get yourself one of those higher value firearms, just so you can hire something that you like that costs a lot of money. Again, your gun collection is an investment. again, when I showcase, when I had a Kimber at the range one time, I love the Kimbers. I have a few Kimbers. Had that at the range. There's a guy, kind of a loudmouth. He's like, well, for the price you paid for that Kimber, you can get yourself 2 Glocks. Or you can get yourself 2 or 3 Glocks. Well, good and all that. I have Glocks, but, at the same time, I want a Kimber, I want some Kimbers too, Hell, and I know he'd probably say, well, for the price I paid for this one, I can get myself about 4 or 5 Glocks. But here's the thing, if your collection solely consists of Glocks, what type of collection is that, And I'm not saying necessarily go out and buy a gun that's really expensive just because it's a high-value gun. Get something you want. And I don't know a single gun collector that doesn't at least want one gun that costs more than $2,000. So save up your money a bit. Spend the money on some of the stuff that you like, because while there are some people that are going to sit there and say, well, I just can't see spending $2,000 on a gun, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, well, I can't see buying 10 of the same guns that are cheap as hell, or 10 similar models that are cheap as hell. I mean, come on. I mean, if you're just trying to spend the minimum amount that you can, just get yourself a Glock G19, and use that as your carry gun, your home defense gun, and everything like that. Maybe get yourself another G19, as a backup, and just call it a day. Come on, we collect guns because we like to, So, yeah, I mean, are we necessarily spending that money for something that's always going to be a practical use gun? Are we always practically spending our money on guns, or I should say in a more practical sense? No. Part of the reason why we collect guns is because that's what we want to do, So, why is it that, it's such a bad idea, when you have the money to go out and spend the money on a more expensive model that you really wanted to have? You see where I'm getting at with this? What I mean by mix it up is, I'll see some people, they'll have a collection of 10 guns and they're all handguns. Or I'll see some person, they'll have 10 guns, but they're all shotguns. They're all break-open shotguns, or they're all pump-action shotguns. I'll see another person, all they've got is like 10 bolt-action rifles, or, but it's all the same type of firearm, or it's all a very similar type of firearm. You want a collection that has character, and you want to be able to go out and shoot a wide range of firearms, then you really do need to mix it up. Expand your firearm ownership. Don't just get, maybe 1 or 2 revolvers, or maybe a few semi-automatic pistols, Get a few different types of guns. Your collection, to have a decent collection, you have to have all 3 classes of NFA Title 1 firearms in my book. Otherwise, you don't have a real collection. You've got to have shotguns, rifles, and pistols. And really, for that one, for handguns, you should at least have at least 1 semi-auto and at least 1 revolver. Otherwise, in my book, you don't have much of a collection. For rifles, you should have at least 1 semi-automatic rifle, 1 bolt-action rifle, and then it's always nice to have a lever action or a break open in there somewhere. Shotguns, you should have at least 1 slide action shotgun and 1 break open shotgun, and possibly a semi-automatic shotgun. That's always an interesting thing to have to your collection, you know. But you see, expand the different types of firearms you have. Now, obviously, don't go and break your state's laws. Don't go break the laws in your own home country if you're watching this from a country outside the U.S., obviously. But again, do what you can to expand your collection. Mix it up a bit. Because it's kind of a dull thing to say, well, I got 3 270 bolt actions, I got 4 308 bolt actions, I've got 5 22 bolt actions, I mean, even though they're all a few different calibers, but they're all bolt action rifles. So mix it up a bit. You see, this right here actually personalizes your collection for you. And I know you're going to have some people with a lot of guns, with a collection of guns, but they don't have one with a personal story. And I know there's only, that there's some people with only a few guns that do have, a gun with a more personal story to it. Or something that they really remember, Me, I've got a few guns. Remember this Desert Eagle? I bought it from the same dealership that both the Fort Hood shooters bought their pistols from, right? And the reason why I did is those guys were getting a lot of negative press. Well, one, I'd always wanted a Desert Eagle, and two, I had the money for it. Three, they were selling it. But the big reason why I bought it there, and I chose that one, is because these guys were getting a lot of unfire negative press. You had, at the time, people like Piers Morgan ripping into them. I saw another person on Twitter made the comment of they should call themselves Guns and Gore, which was really unfair. Nobody talks about the terrorist attack that they did prevent at Fort Hood when they called the law enforcement off after they noticed one guy was acting really suspicious, said something really suspicious that threw him off. So obviously they called law enforcement. They ended up preventing a terrorist attack. But you don't hear Piers Morgan talking about that one. All you hear is that, well, these guys sold guns to mass murderers, to mass murderers. And that's all you hear about them. Even though they're not shady people at all. And even though they're actually pretty cool people, It's a nice gun store. It's one of the largest in the area, if not the largest. You have an excellent selection of firearms there. But I chose this gun at that store shortly after the second Fort Hood shooting, specifically because of that. Because I wanted to make sure they got my business. Again. I'm sorry. That's actually also where I bought the Mark 23. And a few other of my guns there too. Actually, I bought a lot of guns from there. But another gun with a personal story. This Colt Python, I was taking it to shoot with a buddy. We went to a gun range, and of course, anyway, the guy at the desk asked us what we were shooting. So, obviously, put the guns on the desk, put the cases on the desk, opened up the cases, and, I showed him this as one of the many guns. He's like, oh, you know what, you guys go on for free. So, it was pretty cool. You got us onto the range for free. And afterwards, I was talking to the guy. I said, hey, man, that was pretty cool. He's like, yeah, you know what? I'm kind of a gun snob, and I see all these people coming in here. They have money, but they only want to buy cheap guns and shoot cheap guns at the range. None of them want to get anything with any character, and that Colt Python has character, man. Don't ever give that up. which I have no intentions of giving that Colt Python out. You know, so again, this is a gun with a personal story. Let's see. This USP Variant 1. I bought this ages ago, right? You know, I was going through a divorce, you know, and it was one of those times it was a bittersweet homecoming, you know. Got back from Iraq, I was going through a divorce. You know, I was on leave. You know, I walked into a gun store and I saw this USP for sale. It was a Variant 1. It's one of the pistols I've kind of wanted. It's one of the pistols I've really wanted. The H&K USP and 40 cal is a very good model. The USP series are a very good model. They're very reliable, very accurate. Of course, Variant 1 chambered in 40 cal, the original one. And they just made my day seeing it there for sale. I bought that, the tack light for it, the mags for it, you know, a whole bunch of mags for it, you know, all under $650 after taxes. You know? This was, you know, me starting over again for all intents and purposes. I mean, you know, I think getting this gun was one of the big things that helped me move on. You know, move on from the humiliation of me making a bad choice, you know, to marry somebody who ended up being completely the wrong person for me. Let's put it that way, you know. So, again, you know, this gun has a very personal story for me. I had, you know what, I think, you know, this is kind of your christening, so to speak, as a collector, is when you have a gun with a personal story. All right, so moving on. Right, so in conclusion, you follow these principles, you're going to have a gun collection that stands out. Now, I know you're going to be spending some money on this gun collection, but this is one of those things where you get in what you put out. And again, the title of this video is How to Build a Gun Collection That Really Stands Out. I'm trying to help you build a gun collection that really stands out. If there's anything I've left out on this gun collection, I know I left out NFA Title II firearms. I'm just mainly sticking to NFA Title I firearms because obviously there's a lot more involved with getting an NFA Title II firearm, you know, so, and plus a lot of the top that off, NFA Title II firearms are a lot more restricted, even under state law in many cases, than they are, you know, under federal law. So I've mainly focused on NFA Title I, you know, and again, as I say, on the other note, be sure to follow all state, local, and federal laws in the area you're living in. You know, if you live in a place like California or New York, I really can't help you out too much. All I can say is save your money up, look for a job in a state like Texas, Florida, and Georgia, Arizona, and try to pack yourself up and come out there. You know, but again, you guys take her easy. Please comment. Please leave your comments. You know, tell me what you think. Tell me what your opinion is. And y'all take her easy now.